Hi, good afternoon and welcome to the Observer Research Foundation. We are delighted to have all of you here. We have two special guests today. I am going to be very brief because we are starting 5 minutes late and we have a train to catch. First let me introduce Ambassador Stollinger. He's been in New Delhi and he joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1979. He has been posted in Accra, Athens, Lusaka, and he's been at the permanent mission to the European Union in Brussels as well. He was ambassador in Rome and acting Secretary General at The Hague for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining us at ORF. I believe this is your first time. So welcome, and we hope to see you more often. Our special guest and speaker this afternoon is Dr. Uri Rosenthal. He is currently the special envoy for the cyberspace conference that Holland or Netherlands would be hosting in 2015. He is also the chairman of the Advisory Council for Science, Technology and Innovation Policy and chairman of the Supervisory Council for Veteran Care. Previously, he was Minister of Foreign Affairs up till 2012. He is here for two purposes. One is to share with us some of his ideas, thoughts and work in this particular space as we move towards that conference in 2015. But he's particularly here at ORF because he wants to hear from us on some of our ideas, concerns, issues, opportunities, challenges. What I would do is I would misuse my position as the moderator, and Doctor, I would first brief you on what ORF has been doing in this particular space. I'll be very brief. We have a flagship annual conference which we launched last year, which was, even if I say so, successful in bringing together a wide range of stakeholders. We will be having the second edition in October, and we are delighted that the Kingdom of Netherlands will be partnering with us in that process. But within this larger conference that we hold, we have smaller strands of research and activities, and I think those are perhaps where the real conversations lie. We are looking at a few baskets which we believe are of importance to both India and the global community. The first is, I think, critically, the whole tension between development on one hand and security on another hand. And in India, we are particularly concerned about this aspect because, as you would have heard in the previous few months, India has decided to offer social security, cash transfers, last mile public service using the digital medium. So critically, we need to connect 1 billion people over the next 2 decades to this medium. That's a clear imperative for any government that takes office in the coming months. And we have to do it at price points which have never been imagined before. So we have to do it with a population which is largely at $2.50 a day. So we have to give services and access at price points which are purely, uniquely, specifically Indian. And at the same time, we have to also start worrying about security. How do you price security? How do you figure that into the bottom of the pyramid digital models? And I think that's clearly one concern that we are working on at the ORF. The second basket of issues clearly deal with who should speak for managing this medium. Is the state the right unit of interlocution? Or is it individuals, or is it private sector, or is it civil society? And then who is civil society? The big question is who actually represents civil society? What does multi-stakeholderism really mean? Is it a form of controlled anarchy, or is there a certain definitive movement that can result in some inclusive framework? And I think that's a big debate. We are not proposing any answers at this stage because we are still trying to discover the complexity of the multi-stakeholder landscape. But certainly, I don't think this is a settled concept yet. I think it is up for debate, it is up for discussion, and we plan to have a series of discussions on this particular aspect. The third is the role of the private sector itself. And here we find in probably a year or more of research that this is a very divided landscape. If you speak to a banker, he would want a highly regulated, highly secure digital medium for his transactions. But if you talk to a SME, a small company that wants to reach out to millions, they would want the fluidity in the internet. They would want the access to be far easier than say a bank would or say. So there are competing priorities even within the private sector. And moreover, within the private sector, there is an issue of capacity and capability. Big companies have access to governance forums, have capacity to indulge in advocacy and lobbying. Small companies who are really going to be the net beneficiaries very seldom will have the opportunity. How do we kind of navigate this private sector space? And finally, it is on who really the forum that we create. Should we look at the telecom example and try and use the telecom model? Do we use the UN framework to create a multilateral framework? Do we look at an NGO like an ICANN, and is that the unit that works? These are all questions, and I don't think there are settled positions. There has been a lot of debate. I think we are going to have the next round in Brazil very soon, and we are going to probably be seeing some serious discussions there. But basically, these are the 4 big baskets that we are trying to analyze at Observer Research Foundation. And with this, let me end my introduction to what we do at Observer Research Foundation and hand over the floor to you, Ambassador Rosenthal. You can take as much time as you need. Share with us your thoughts, your ideas, your activities, and then certainly if you have some questions you want to put forward on the table, you can place them, and then I will randomly pick some people, and all of you can try and get my attention, and I'll try to accommodate you in the next 1 hour 15 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saram. Thank you for hosting us here. Not only Dr. Saram, but I see the presence and attendance of a number of ambassadors and one former ambassador to the Netherlands, Madame Boucaillé, and it's so pleasant to see you here again. Dr. Saram, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, of course it's a great opportunity for me to speak here in this formidable surrounding context of a true think tank. And as a special envoy for Cyberspace Conference 2015, to be more specific, April 2015 in the Netherlands, I feel much obliged to have already been talking to so many true experts in this field here in India. When I came here, I was well aware of the fact that here I'm in a period that you have your elections in this biggest democracy of the world, where the voting takes place by electronic device. We are lagging behind on this. We are still using the red pencil. We are going for it, but we don't trust it. Some Dutch don't trust it to the full extent, these machines, let me say that. I've had 2 wonderful days now in an exchange of views, together with the delegation from the Netherlands. And what we are up to is to see how we can broaden and deepen the collaboration with India, with the government, with the corporate world, with the civil society, not to forget civil society. And this is because we think that the international dimensions of the cyberspace are an intrinsic part to the story. Because the internet is interconnectedness throughout the world. Let me say emphatically that cyber is a key aspect of our social, economic, and political dealings and wheelings. We see increasingly digitalized societies. The example you mentioned about social benefits to be brought, through digital instruments to millions of people, well, it shows it all. Let me say as a side remark that we share the same challenges, but they are different in numbers. As the former ambassadors, knowing the Dutch population is as large or as small as the moderate estimate goes for New Delhi. And when it would be really true that you have you would have already inhabitants here in the 20s, then that is a number we will never see in our country. Now, this cyber requires, according to our opinion, new thinking of governments, businesses, and citizens alike. You can't just transpose the issues which we have in other domains, although there are comparisons to be made, to the cyber space. Looking at the key aspects of the cyber problem and the cyber solutions, we have 3 points to make. First, when it is about cyber, it is about freedom. We live, communicate, learn, share on the internet. Freedom is also about a democratic society and democratic arrangements. It is about what the Dutch government, together with some other governments, initiated in 2011 about freedom online. As a coalition of freedom online. It is about promoting free access to the open internet, and with regard to this free access and these sort of questions, when we have certain ingrained and historical achievements in the offline domain, you might always look whether they would be applicable, of course adapted, to the online domain. Freedom is the first main aspect. The second is economic growth and innovation. Looking at the Netherlands, we have the highest internet penetration in the European Union. Amsterdam, in your standards, a small city, has nevertheless an internet exchange is in the top 5 of the world. And for sure, internet also in an economically advanced country as the Netherlands, internet is a key for innovation and social and economic growth. The figure I'm used to is that the expectations are for a global growth thanks to internet, e-commerce, and what have you, of between 2 and 4, some say even 5% in the coming decade. So that's enormous. At the same time, thanks Dr. Sarand for this message. It's also indeed about bringing social development to sometimes remote areas of the world through the digital instrument. Second element thus is economic growth and innovation. And the third is definitely security. Users of the internet should be confident that the internet is secure. And here I have a very minor little story to tell you, that the Dutch government, I was in government at that moment, was suddenly confronted with what is called the DigiNotar affair, which was about a certificates company that was hacked, and which caused an unreliability in hundreds of sites, including all the sites and sub-sites of Google. And these were a terrible 2 or 3 days. Let me say to you that it was, of course, for well understood reasons kept confident, but it is now public, and there is a public report by the Dutch Council for Safety Investigations, which is public and which you can pick up from the internet, and if you would not be able to do so, we would be happy to forward it to you. This affair actually triggered large investments in the Netherlands, overnight I would say, in the system, strategy and capacities with regard to cyber in the Netherlands, including our new National Cybersecurity Center, which is more or less comparable to what you have here in this country. Now these three issues, freedom, economic growth and innovation, security, represent for me the kind of internet that the Netherlands envisions. A free, open and secure internet that is an engine for growth and innovation and for the benefit of the people. And in order to implement that vision, global efforts need to be about. And these global efforts are, according to our stance, 5. First, and you know that it is a buzzword today, a multi-stakeholder approach. We should cherish and preserve, is our opinion, the organic structure of the internet, in which a broad group of stakeholders takes responsibility and could be held accountable for its growth. Second, freedom and open internet. The internet is a key driver for innovation. It is a marketplace for ideas. It is at the cutting edge of global trends. It is spurring growth. Third, security. Adequate security that is necessary to keep the internet secure for its users, which keeps, emphatically said, internet criminals out while maintaining an open platform stance. Fourth, as to governance, the Netherlands is in strong favor of internationalizing the governance of internet. But a new structure should still reflect the multi-stakeholders model. States should definitely be involved, take the responsibility they need to take, but not exclusively. Industry and civil society are equally important. And here we do agree upon differences of opinion, sometimes in principle, sometimes in the nuances. Fifth, participation. The developing countries, maybe there are better words to use these days, particularly in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, should have a voice in the discussion about the internet. Why? Simply because the internet is the number one global interconnected network. Everybody throughout the world is sharing, and that means that we can't afford ourselves to have countries and continents which are lagging behind. Because if they are lagging behind, it's also in our self-interest to do something about it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Cyberspace Conference in April, Netherlands, 2015, April 2015, will be hosted as a part of the so-called London process. It is the fourth conference after London 2011, Budapest 2012, and Seoul, South Korea 2013. It will be building upon achievements, and it will try to take the next step, which we all share as a needed new development, namely putting principles into practice. And what we do offer is a platform for discussion on all cyber-related issues, including security, freedom, privacy, and economic growth, bringing together the most relevant actors from government, business, and civil society, including, for instance, the people who are now working on the so-called Carl Bildt Commission on Internet governance. Of course, ICANN, and possibly, it's still in the offing, the Net Mundial midterm review. We offer also to get on with regard to the questions and answers about norms of behavior in cyber, including the application of international law, cyber diplomacy, and civil-military relations in cyber. We believe these strategic issues require our constant attention. And then, a point which is increasingly popping up, the key topic of capacity building. We want to mobilize the support for and assistance to countries that want to invest in cyber or need to invest in cyber, to come to a true exchange of knowledge, research, and best practices. We believe a broad group of countries shares our overall vision of what the internet domain should look like. We are striving for convergence of opinions on these issues. We do understand that not all stakeholders will share this vision to the full extent, but we believe that, for instance, the Netherlands and India do share that vision, do depend on a free and open and secure internet, and of course, we talked it over this morning also with your Deputy National Security Advisor. We sit in the same democratic boat, and that is a comfortable idea to share. Last point, the pace of developments and the complexity of the cyber domain make it all the more relevant to engage with civil society and academia. We are seeking such partnerships here also in India. We have already made concrete progress on this, and because only then we will find solutions that surpass the boundaries of existing domains. We are glad in that context that we will co-host, as you already mentioned, Dr. Saran, the Sci-Fi conference in the second half of the year. It will be another opportunity to deepen our cooperation in this field and to exchange thoughts and ideas on how to move the debate forward. Now, that's what I had to say at the beginning of our discussion. I'm now going very comfortably but attentively in the listening mode, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I think you actually, Ambassador, in your own manner of speaking, placed these 5 questions in many ways. The discussions around multi-stakeholderism, about free and open internet, about security as a key element, on how do we create an international internet governance mechanism, and finally inclusion or participation is put. So in a sense, these are good frameworks to have our current round of discussion with. There are some shy people, so what I did was I took the permission to ask a few people to intervene beforehand, while you all can muster the courage to raise your hand. So what I'll do is I'll first ask Karnika Seth, who's a cyber lawyer. She works on intellectual property for over a decade now, and she was the chairperson and founder of the Cyber Laws Consulting Center, the world's first integrated cyber law center that offers services in this particular space. So Karnika, over to you first.
Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. Solinga, Mr. Saran. It's indeed a pleasure to be here, and it's a proud privilege as well. It is something that the subject is such that is very close to our heart, because cyber law is a very dynamic area, and as we all would agree here, there is so much yet to be done. It is an area that India has seen for the last 14 years. The IT Act was enacted in India, which is the Information Technology Act, in the year 2000. And since then, the Act has seen many amendments. And the last amendments, the major amendments took place in the year 2008. And the Act as we see today, I would just give a very brief introduction of what it really involves. It has a framework of providing the clause on jurisdiction. The IT Act in India is not limited to, the application is not limited only to India, but also to citizens or nationals who may be based abroad. And although the prescriptive jurisdiction is very wide, the application when it comes to implementation of the Act, as we all know, internet is trans-border, it is something which is limitless. There are problems in the enforcement when it comes to getting enforcement of an order or getting assistance from the police or the other concerned departments. So that's something which is a major, I think, area which we are right now concentrating on, because India has not signed any cybercrime convention. So as a result, when we do investigations, when we see with the police, we have seen that there is a lot of work which needs to be done as international cooperation agreements are lacking. So that's something I would like to lay emphasis on at the first point. And secondly, we have a framework which provides in this Act the civil liabilities and what are offences, the chapter on offences, what are the kind of cyber crimes which have been emerging in India. We see many new crimes added. As a result of the MMSs being circulated, we have a clause on offence for video barbarism, we have a clause for hate speech, we have a clause for protecting privacy, especially women, and child pornography. Now these are few areas which were not being addressed in the IT Act before, but now have been added to and have been addressed. Cyber terrorism, which has a punishment of up to life imprisonment, has also been added in the IT Act. So these are first two aspects I'd like to touch on. The others being, there are different bodies formed under the IT Act which have the powers to act under the Act. And one being the certifying authority, the controller of certifying authorities who issues the digital signatures, which is a means of authentication of a data, electronic records, legal recognition to electronic records, admissibility of electronic records are new areas which we have looked at recently. And India has also now formulated laws to govern how to manage the cyber cafes. There were no rules and regulations before, but now we have a very good, strong framework for that. And explanation on who is an intermediary. There are online shopping malls today. There are so many ways in which, for example, Facebook, we have social media. How do you regulate social media? What is the liability of an intermediary? Now these are some questions which the latest IT Act and the new provisions have addressed. Freedom of speech. Now the latest case before the Chief Justice of India, I mean the Supreme Court, I think you might have read in the press also, is about explaining Section 66A of the IT Act, which covers offensive material, which covers hate speech and spam. Now these are some new emerging issues under the Indian landscape. Coming to the second wing of my introduction, the role of the IT Act. Now when we say implementation, it has been implemented in a big way, especially with the government departments, the licensing. If you see the way the departments used to function, they were using only hard copies. The correspondence with the users now is through electronic medium, which is a very big, leap which India has seen in the past. And social media is even being used by law enforcement agencies, even for traffic challans and other, offences or penalties. So that's another way that electronic commerce or e-governance has emerged in India. E-courts, that's another phenomenon. We have recently seen in Delhi High Court, e-courts have also emerged. We are using video conferencing to carry out arbitration cross-examinations or, even witness statements in the court, which is another leapfrog I think India has made. And when it comes to litigation, we have few cases emerging, especially pertaining to the role of intermediaries. We have seen few convictions, so far maybe only one or two convictions, but there are new convictions, I think, which are the final conclusions of these cases we will see in the next coming years. Freedom of speech, social media, the jurisdiction, these are the key issues. Intellectual property has seen a big wave because intellectual property by and large follows the trademark or the copyright principle. So we have got many cases on that. But the latest in the e-commerce world is the e-wallets. With the rise of Oxygen and MobiKwik and other forms of electronic payments, we have seen a rise in the e-commerce area. Education and training, that's another area which is booming at present, because we've seen a lot of times online videos and trainings, webinars are really helpful in creating awareness among masses. Especially in the rural India, we've seen a trend of even farmers getting information about weather forecasts and seeds, which is, I think, creditable, in terms of what we have seen in the IT space. Now, I think with this, I would not take much of your time, but CERT, I would like to say, is the main body who's a nodal agency in India, looks after security and any critical infrastructure requirements in India. And these are the main areas which I wanted to just highlight. I know the time is short, I will not take much of your time, but I'll be very happy to give you any inputs further on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Karnika. I will come to Mr. Govindrao next. He manages the Nixie. But before I come to you, sir, there are two important aspects that Karnika just spoke about. And I think that we are kind of struggling with that in India as well. I think the first is, it's very easy to say that create a multi-stakeholder governance platform. It's very easy to say that civil society, private sector and governments have equal voice and equal weight and equal say. But eventually, national sovereign laws are going to ensure enforcement of commerce, security, criminality, terrorism. And one of the tensions that we find is, it's not that anyone is, I'm not one of those who believes that countries are going to inflict cyber damage on each other beyond a certain point. They're going to tickle each other. I don't believe that any of the big countries with the capacity, they are so invested in the digital system today that I don't think any big responsible country is ever going to bring down the digital system, because everyone has a lot to lose. There are some outliers who don't have enough stake in the system and have the capacity. But I think the key disputes are going to occur over what we call, and some experts call, is lawfare. It's going to be warfare through legal systems. It's over jurisdiction. It's over digital territories. It's about an Indian transaction taking place through servers located in Napa Valley. And then suddenly which laws apply and who's the adjudicating authority. So it's the whole complex interplay between territory, jurisdiction and law that's really going to be the contested and debated space going forward. The second thing she mentioned was on intermediaries and content, and I think this is another area where there are differences. In some countries in Northern and Western Europe, child pornography is not crime. So you can say in India it is crime, but you can go and upload pornography from those countries, and suddenly it is still accessible to everyone. In Korea, for example, every phone they bring out, every smartphone has to have the shutter clicker sound when you take a photograph, because upskirt photography was discovered to be a big problem in Korea, and they have now mandated that hardware has to be changed in order for it to be used in the Korean market. But the phones are available from any of their other neighbors. So these are interesting questions. So there are two aspects which I think are important. Dr. Rao.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Very nice discussion here. I think Kanika touched upon the jurisprudence and those law activities and the legal aspects. So since Nixie is dealing with the resource management, Internet protocol addresses and the domain names, Internet domain names. So the recent announcement by the US on the 14th of March that NTIA moving out of this INA functions, and then how the globally the IP addresses, the root servers are going to be managed. So that is the next phase of challenges which are coming up globally. How we are going to do these activities, whether server has to be at one place, which country is to be placed, and all these connected issues, whether multi-stakeholder concept, how representative is a multi-stakeholder. In the government sector, we know these are the governments, but in the multi-stakeholder civil society or the private sector, who are the private sector, how authentic they are, how representative they are in the society. So these are the questions which are going to come up in the global management of the resources. And then another issue is the how real-time jurisprudence area, how the trans-border nature of the internet, how the legal status is going to be discussed, that is the concerns of the governments, anything to be hate content or anything to be removed from the Facebook or anything. how we are going to deal with this kind of situation globally, where the servers are lying not in that jurisdiction but lying at the outside. So these are few of the thoughts which I thought from the NICSI point of view and from the global perspective in the ICANN, in the IGF, which is going to be strengthened from the time to time, how we are going to tackle with this kind of situation. Thank you.
Do you have anything to say at this point, or should I call you next?
Well, I can go again. Yeah. Well, perhaps good to say that I was promised a listening mode for myself, which looks wonderful, by the way. Although it's sometimes difficult for me. But let me say that with regard to the catalogue of issues you are raising, I would say here too, you know, we are in the same boat. All items you mention immediately are with us. You know, it's simply part of our concerns, and we, in some respects, we are dealing with them already. Others, we are discussing them. We have some legal clauses, some laws on this. For instance, our Breach Notification Act. We may have a catalogue of criminal acts which may differ from yours in some respects. Although as far as I know, child pornography is also a crime in my country, definitely. We are there on par. With regard to the question, you raised the question already about the multi-stakeholders model. Sir, you do the same. Let me say that I was very pleased when we had a conversation today with a CEO of your corporate world who actually stressed, and he's really corporate in many ways, but he stressed what we call the need for socially responsible action by corporations, by private actors. And if I would combine that with the fact that government, I learned that in my academic years, that the government, according to the public choice theory, is the provider of public goods. And when you look at, for instance, in my country, the fact that the infrastructure is basically in the hands of private corporations. These private corporations are actually providing public or semi-public goods to the public. So there you can see how we can bridge a potential gap between these two in the triangle in the equation. So, and I would say that of course there are principal differences on this matter with some countries in the world, and we know all about what kind of countries we are talking, but I don't see them with your country. And then it is our mutual task to try and even out, so that we can in any case find common ground on how to actually materialize this notion of a multi-stakeholder model. And I took immediately to my mind, in any case, if not to my heart, your remark, Dr. Saran, on talking, when I talked about equal votes. I think it is about proportionality and subsidiarity in this field. But on the other hand, We don't want governments to seize full control over a open internet, because then we have damaged all of us. That's it.
Currently, you're Director of Textless Consulting Services. Swamitha, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharan, and Excellencies.
I think precisely the reason why I've been everywhere muddles my mind a lot. And I think yesterday, I think this is my second meeting with the delegation here. Excellencies, thank you again for being with me. I think a lot of words have been used yesterday. Thanks to the excellent wine, it was easier to kind of. Yeah, always helps. But anyway, okay. So I guess there are 2-3 things that I'm going to kind of concentrate on. 3-4 key elements that Dr. Rosenthal talked about. I think one is the openness of the internet. Coming from where I do, which is where one of the roles that I have is sitting on the board of a company called Public Interest Registry, which runs a domain called .org, which is promoted by Internet Society. Okay, Internet Society is the one which is the mother home for IIT, IIT, and these structures. So the money that we make as domain providers for .org actually goes into supporting these organizations. And I think all these organizations, everyone around the world knows, is about openness and free access, freedom to access internet is all about. And that's our main objective which we promote worldwide. So I think one of those objectives is very, very clearly there, which we will not ever deviate from. What we would basically like, and this is a sense that I gather from all the constituencies that I meet, even during ICANN meetings, I think we are fairly grounded to the fact that worldwide, most people actually, and I'm saying most people, in trying to describe what multi-stakeholder would be all about. It's a word, it's a term that we have been using very often now, all over the place, but we are still to define who's not in the multi-stakeholder category. Okay, who are the ones who are left out? And to my mind, if I speak, if I look at I look at the global structure and I look at the Indian structure, both sides of the fence. From the Indian structure, what I see in the last few years, I think I'm very encouraged by the fact that civil society has started to play a bigger role in terms of discussing internally as to what this whole cyber governance is all about, internet governance is all about. There's a lot of awareness that is developing, but I think it still needs to evolve much more. I still find a very limited means available with the civil society to go and play a hard role, a role which emphasizes our national priorities on how to be able to manage some role in governing the internet. Okay, so I don't see our civil society from the Indian side being able to do that much, but then I think they need to go there. Okay, so discussion is great. This is an awareness building exercise which I think people will become aware as to what are the issues at stake. So one issue is, as earlier we started off, was about national priorities. Now national priorities, when we talk about national priorities, it is about governance, and it is not about governments only, as Dr. Rosenthal yesterday said. It's not about government, but I think to rephrase that, it is about government's role in governance of internet also. Apart from the role of the private sector and civil society and individual players and whoever is a stakeholder in the internet model. So I think what's been highlighted is that India has already been on the way for a while in terms of creating a legislative framework to enable trust, which is also key ingredient for security on the internet. So we are going there, we are getting there, and there's, as the internet evolves, we will also be evolving our legislative framework to manage all this trust issues. That's one part. But when we talk about governance, yes, the US threw open a big challenge now by saying that, okay, we are going to relinquish control over internet. Now that's a very big mother statement that has come out in the last few years of IGF, and that's got everyone going. And I think when it comes to the US government relinquishing control, it is all about, as Dr. Govind already has said, and we have been discussing before, is about how can we reshape the way ICANN functions and manages the role it does play in terms of governing the internet as we know it. Now when we talk about governing the internet, ICANN's role is basically about IANA functions, which is about managing domain names and protocols and IP addresses. And we know that there's a structure which is already established and working very well in the last 15 years or so, since the time the US government started it off. Right? Now do we break it down and restructure it? because some constituencies do not feel comfortable that is being managed the way it should be managed. It should be more open. Because the board sitting there, which is also an international board by the way, but then they are responsible to the US government, and US government by way of its AOC, which is the Affirmation of Commitment, which is the controlling instrument that they have, with this they control INA functions through ICANN, is something that every nation probably today talks about in terms of how do we get a role in there. Okay, so, and when we talk about US government's role in internet governance, it boils down to some very specific stuff, issue, which is an action. It is about, let us say, there is a country code that needs to be put into the root servers, which is new, or a new domain name. For example, we were discussing yesterday again, take example of .ram, okay, or .amazon. Okay, some of these new PLDs that I can open up and companies have taken over to introduce to the internet. Now there was this whole debate about why and how did ICANN go about distributing these names. What right did they have? Because there were a lot of constituencies and stakeholders who were opposed to all that, but then they still went ahead. So are they responsible to anybody, or are they taking the global interests along? Right? Are they concerned about that or not? That's the issue that everyone's being bothered about. So more than I think trust and security, I think it's also about how they're managing the current critical resources for running the internet. Okay, and I think IGF has been a discussion platform, but no decisions, right? That's one of the, not failing I would say, but then I think this is something which has left people wondering as to what kind of governance model are we talking about. Okay, and I think we are still very confused about what to propose to the US, because US says when we relinquish control, there are 4 parameters that you have to meet. Government should not be involved, it should not be a government model, which means basically one of the models that was being touted for many years was ITU takes over control from ICANN. Okay, but it is not going to be about ITU because most of us will not be comfortable with the telecom model, because the internet has flourished irrespective of the telecom model, despite the telecom model. And if you impose a telecom model or ITU model on internet, it just might not function the way it does, and we all want it to function better than it does. So that's, I think, the crux of the issue. What model do we propose going forward from Brazil onwards to the US, where multi-stakeholders adequately are represented on something like an ICANN structure, or is it a new structure that needs to come out? Okay, what would be that new structure which can be effective and a structure which takes on the role of ICANN and which is not really controlled by the US government. So ICANN itself has been talking about shifting ICANN out of the US and then relocating it to, let's say, Switzerland and Geneva, make it an international NGO rather than a non-profit controlled by the US government laws, okay, or the law of California, for example. So that's the model that we were talking about. So how much, so ICANN today has a lot of constituencies who are called multi-stakeholders also. They have the commercial constituencies, they have the non-commercial constituencies, they have the GAC, which represents the nations and the governments. So various constituencies, they have these country codes constituencies, they have the generic TLD constituencies. So many constituencies are there. So if there are certain constituencies which feel that they are not represented, maybe the civil society needs to strengthen itself in its role that it plays in ICANN. I think from my few years that I've been going to ICANN, civil society, I may be wrong, but I think my sense is civil society should actually try and go to ICANN and see how it functions, what it does, how and what kind of better role that the civil society representatives can play. Not easy, because I know civil society is a big, huge world who is going to represent and say things on behalf of everybody else. But that's the nature of discussion that we have to have. Okay, we can't escape that. And unless we do that, I don't think we'll arrive at a model that we can propose. So I think that's the thing that we need to look at. That's the function that we have to address today. Is what is the model going forward to do what ICANN does today?
Yeah. I think that's very.
Let me say, throughout your, sir, thank you for this intervention. Throughout your message, it crossed my mind that I actually should say to you that, let me say that the way we are thinking about it is we try to stay away from dogmatic kind of suggestions and proposals. And for that matter, to show you how also the Dutch government is well aware of its responsibilities. The Netherlands I think, are the only country in the world now, together with, I think, Chile, but I'm not particularly sure about that, which has a full-fledged law on net neutrality. So there you go, you know, to bring some shape and format to the role of the ISPs, the Internet Service Providers. And this is also now part of the debate, and more and beyond that, also of some initial kind of decision making on the EU level. So it is not a matter of a free-floating kind of approach for some parts of this multi-stakeholder arrangement. And I very much endorse the fact that you come up in any case with a proposal how to proceed. Not that, of course, we of course see immediately series of obstacles when you are bringing up the role of the NGOs. Then you get the story about are they representative for what is their constituency, etc. But it's in any case, we have to reflect upon it and start thinking about it and come to some closure of the discussion at a certain moment.
Thank you, sir. Sekar, can I call you Sekar is the national editor on security and some internal policies with the Hindustan Times, which is the second largest range daily in India. He has been following this particular sector for a while, and he has strong views on some of these issues. Sekar, over to you.
Well, thank you, Samir. In fact, Mr. Rosenthal, the way Samir framed the initial discussion was very beautiful, and in fact, he captured a lot of these things. And I'm glad you also brought in net neutrality. And in fact, that's something that I wanted to have bring up in my intervention, because in many ways, that's a discussion that still hasn't started in India at all. And in fact, I find from the little that I know, there's a lot of lack of coherence in the positions that we are taking, whether it is in the government or in the civil society in India. For example, if you're familiar with our systems, we have a ministry, which is a Ministry of Communication and Information Technology. Well, communication looks at telecom, information technology looks at the internet and related issues, and they actually created a multi-stakeholder advisory group. But I was a little surprised to see that there was nobody representing the telecom sector on the image. Now that's a little interesting, because most of our service providers are telecom companies, and yet they don't, and yet they continue to do whatever they want to do in terms of whatever pricing issues and stuff like that and accessibility, and yet they are not part of that meeting. So as a result, there is no discussion on net neutrality from a policy perspective. And in fact, the only regulator which we have, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, they have made some sort of noises about net neutrality, but there has been absolutely no guidelines or no directions whatsoever. And which brings me back to the point about which Samir raised right at the beginning, that when you are providing security of all sorts, how do you provide free and secure access to a whole lot of mass of people who are essential to the internet? Now, there's also this issue about that if you have looked at India's submissions to the Net Mundial conference which is coming up, it's completely shaped by a security narrative. It does not look at access, it does not look at rights, it does not look at frameworks, it only discusses security and how to look at security from a surveillance perspective, from a cyber security perspective, which I think at some level is quite disturbing. And it also speaks about the dissonance within the government. In the sense, the Ministry of External Affairs, which plays a leading role on this, has a very government multilateral view. There are other voices in other parts of the government who prefer a multi-stakeholder view. But there again, I have discovered there is a major problem, and that is the question of legitimacy. That when people are saying that they are stakeholders, how do you establish their legitimacy? How do you ensure that they are not going to be fronts for lobbyists or other companies or corporate lobbies who anyway have a large say in these matters and have inordinate influence, as we have seen in the United States? For example, the whole net neutrality debate, when Verizon took FCC to court, the courts actually ruled in favor of Verizon. So those are very, very critical issues, and the danger is that unless we resolve them, India is ending up being sided or on the side of those countries which it is not particularly comfortable with, because there are totalitarian regimes, and would actually prefer to be with a much more democratic perspective. But they are sort of the debates that we had in the real world when NATO was coming up and there was a Warsaw Pact. I mean, India is again ending up being on the side of countries it is not particularly very comfortable with, precisely because those issues are not being addressed which India is raising. And in fact, right now, in February, Indian civil society took up a major issue, and Indian civil society right now, from what I have seen, is feeling extremely disconnected from the international civil society on some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that he raises some very important issues that I will come back to you later on. But now can we open the, I have pulled out all the names I had in my head, and can we go around the table, round the room if someone wants to come in at this point of time?
I just want to correct that DOT is there in that MAG.
Not that the latest,
Stakeholder Advisory Group.
not the latest that I have seen.
No, they are there in that committee now. Because MHA, MEA, DOT, INB and Law Ministry, all are there.
And curiously, I think this is, as you are aware, the licensor is also one of the largest, service providers. So this is a curious case in itself on how you navigate this reality. Does someone want to come in at this point? Sir.
Yeah, I'm Ashish from AKS IT Services. Whatever we have discussed, I have certain points. If we have to have a global cyber governance, then UN has to come into play, because mainly everything at the moment is governed by the US. So
Is there a question?
no, I just started this, so I was seeing
Sorry, there was a long pause.
So what is happening? Because this is a thing which is a cyber thing which is available now. Almost everywhere the internet is there. So this is being used for the surveillance, espionage, and a lot of things are there. And not only that, you have to have some global discipline. Like we have Interpol, there will be need to have an inter-cyber pol, because they have a lot of things which are happening across the globe. So if we have at a global level some sort of a governance framework, and all countries they become part of it, because cyber is boundaryless, I think we can have certain good things going on. Thank you.
Next. Just push it up.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rosenthal. It's such an honor to be here, sitting at the same table with you. Remember vividly how we brought you to India 2 years ago and how much you enjoyed your visit then. Thank you very much for giving us Netherlands' perspective on this very important issue. And we all respect how much Netherlands has in fact done for the freedom of the net. Back here in India, some of the issues which have been raised at the risk of being typed as Ministry of External Affairs and therefore in favor of a multilateral approach, I just wanted to bring to your attention that there are certain issues in certain developing countries, including my own, which would need a multilateral approach. Let me just briefly touch on just 2-3 examples. One is on the whole issue of security of women. Quite apart from child prostitution and child pornography is banned under EU laws and stringent Dutch laws, so I wouldn't put that up as an example, not at all, particularly after what has happened in the past recently in some European countries. But certainly women's security, the whole issue of indecent images of women and hate in the context of, if you would recall, that immediately after World War II, there were certain countries, including Germany, that banned Mein Kampf. Now you could say, it could be argued, that banning Mein Kampf, because it was hate ideology, strictly speaking went against freedom of speech. But there were some very important reasons why at that point of time, Germany banned Mein Kampf. Similarly, in India, there are incendiary videos which sometimes get circulated, which are made deliberately in order to not only just create a law and order problem, but to create problems within communities. How do you regulate that kind of issue? Would be difficult for just a multi-stakeholder international multi-stakeholder to understand those kind of issues. So you would either have to plug in a multilateral approach, or you would need to build up governance mechanisms that would take into account particular issues arising from very large democracies like India's. Because this is a problem arising in a democracy. This would not arise in a non-democratic setup. So I think it would be important, both for the future conference and for the one of which you are especially involved, to keep this perspective in mind for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ma'am.
My name is Jayalakshmi. I'm very pleased to be part of this discussion. I wanted to point out 3 or 4 issues pertaining to content, particularly. The fact that the vast number of communities that are not yet reached are not speaking English or using any Roman language. We are talking of a huge access question that actually gets denied, not just because of a lack of access to technology, but the lack of access of content itself. And therefore they don't see the value as it is today. That's one part. I thought that needs to be borne in mind. The second is the fact that the governments, and particularly India, is investing very highly, very heavily in e-governance and access of services to the public through internet. And already the divide that exists is going to get accentuated, primarily because there is no open access policy of government services. They are locked in. So we do not, while we have an open standards policy, none of the government's own services are actually vetted against that policy. So there is a whole deficit of policy versus review of the policy's implementation. And I think these are the dynamics that probably many countries might be facing, and that needs to be looked at. The third relates to education, and I'm just going to stop at that. I have a few more points, and if the discussion gives me an opportunity, I'll come back to that. Education, increasingly the open university system is the way we are looking at to reach that divide of literacy and education. But there isn't a clear-cut understanding of how e-learning services provided by private companies are going to be accessible both by pricing and by technology. So while we can have a broader framework of open access, all the implementation frameworks that are being provided may be locked. And that is a problem. And I thought we don't know yet how to address it, but thought that might be a good thing to understand from the world how they have addressed these questions. Thank you.
So,
good evening, Doctor. My name is Vijay Kapoor. I'm actually curious, listening to everybody over here and looking at the diversity of opinions and the complexity of issues that are coming up, and looking at the fundamental dichotomy between free and open and governance. Where is the slider going to halt? And how are you going to determine where to actually halt the slider? The minute you say governance, it automatically implies more rules. Given the complexity of the issues, if you want to include all these issues, you're going to either have to say, create a lot of exceptions simply because the issues are so complex, or you're going to have to sort of really limit the scope of what you're going to regulate, or you're going to have to create an extremely complex framework that caters for all situations, in which case it's probably going to be unworkable. So I'm actually curious as to how we are thinking about managing the complexity of this whole exercise.
I think that's something that we're all curiously looking forward to. But maybe I should come back to you. You heard 3 or 4 projections.
I cannot, sir, I cannot get into detailed answers to the questions which have been raised. But let me make some overall comments. When we talk about let me say, malbehavior of people which are considered in a democratic country to be against the law, we call them crime. And of course there are, if you would make an inventarization of the catalogue of crimes throughout the world, you will see that one country will have a somewhat different catalogue compared to the others. But we have there, we have some kinds of malbehaviors which we all consider to be in that category. And then it is for sure, we discussed it already, that then the state is responsible to fight that crime. Second point, which is about, by the way, Mein Kampf is also forbidden in the Netherlands. But I do understand the issue you are raising. And there are, you know, let me, the bottom line is, the internet is accelerating expanding in an exponential, nearly unimaginable way and speed. Speed is enormous, dissemination factor is huger than whatever we have seen throughout the history of the world. And we should, if we are 20 years further, we will look back and we will maybe say that we were in the eye of the storm, if not the tsunami or what have you. That's I would say that's a fact, and we are just starting to think it over in a serious way and to sort things out. Next point, if it is about content, madam, I think that I have not very much to add to the message by Dr. Sarang about this example of bringing social benefits to the whole continent here, you know, in an effective way through digital means. And let me say, when I was here in November last year on this roundtable innovation, the big story and the big issue was about the fact that your country is now about to disseminate the mobile communication facilities to 2,000 villages, which makes many more. You see, I'm lost in 250,000, which multiplied by 2,000, average size of a village, makes for huge numbers. So, and our point about economic growth is accompanied by the term social growth and social development. So there I'm with you. Then this nice question from the back. I remember a theater piece in London where the title was "Can you hear me from the back?" I did hear you, sir. Let me try to get online with you on common ground. When you talk about regulation, we also have this notion of course, self-regulation. And in my country, it happens every year that a sector is not doing particularly well, is saying, well, we will go for self-regulation, and then actually the government says, okay, you are going to regulate your act, you get your act together through self-regulation, but the Damocles sword is hanging about. If you don't come to your senses, then we will intervene. So but at the same time, this is a message that we don't need immediately to jump to government. Self-regulation would be, for me, part of the governance dimension. So your question is very sharp, but I'm not falling for a chair.
So at this point, may I just also add one comment? Like you said, I completely agree that to your apt statement, like when there is censorship, there is self-regulation on the other side. It's like two sides of the same coin. What we have maybe not discussed so far is something that is a new term that we call as netiquette. When we are talking about ethics online, it is something which is very important, especially when we talk about self-regulation. We've heard a lot on best practices. How do you safeguard yourself from breach of privacy, or how do you safeguard yourself from breach of security? But on the other hand, what are your responsibilities while you're online? What are the things that one needs to bear in mind as a duty, as a citizen or a netizen, I would say? What is one's duty online? So that's something which you can perhaps add in your agendas to discuss.
That's an excellent point. Yeah.
So I had gone through the...
Okay, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Venkatesh. I work for a company called APCO Worldwide. We consult a lot of clients in cybersecurity currently. So, firstly, I'd like to congratulate your country on releasing a very forward-looking document on the National Cybersecurity Strategy when it released. But, just a small question on the document. So, it was released by the Ministry of Security and Justice, as opposed to, in India, it's an information and communication. It's the responsibility of ICT, the ministry. So do you think that the priorities in your country, could it have been, was there a debate to release it under a particular ministry, and did it change? Right. So the second part of the question is, in terms of, in India, you have a lot of companies that are looking at the labor problem in cybersecurity. We are grossly under-equipped. And a lot of countries in Europe are taking advantage or trying to train Indians. So are there any agendas in that?
Yes.
My name is Vinod Saigal. I too was accredited to your country from 1986 to 90. I see things differently, seeing the enormity, complexity, diversity, and the problems that have been highlighted. And if you sit all evening, other problems that could come up, I see a breaking point coming. And no two analogies are alike, but like in the WTO it's not working and we're going in for regionalism, do you think a point will come, at least I will come, where you have some sort of a cordon sanitaire around regions and then you have a global network?
Balkanization of the internet, if you will.
Thank you. Let me also tell you, when you said please invite the civil society, most of us diplomats fall into that category as well. So we have a lot of diplomats and international media here as well. So please go on.
Alex Haagmaak in Netherlands. Thank you for your presentation and introduction, and also thank you for raising the point of ethics. This has to do, of course, with values and norms. My main question will be, whose values and norms? We're talking here, my country, your country, our countries, etc., etc. But there's also a kind of, let's say, global governance made by the United Nations. Is there a role by the United Nations? And on top of that, it's nice to have values, norms, ethics, etc. But who is going to enforce all these rules, regulations, values, norms in this, I don't know what kind of world, but somebody has to do it. So whose values and norms and how to enforce them?
So one more intervention, yes, sir.
Dr. Zorin, the way now this crime world is becoming global, there is no boundary. To what extent international justice court is sensitive to like Wikipedia issues?
Good. So
I think with that we will end the interventions part. Sir, you have 3 or 4 sets of questions already. You could also add your final thoughts on this particular conversation. And of course, we can carry it down to the lounge. But for your final word on this afternoon.
In my country at this moment, people would say, the chairman would say, be brief please, because we want to go to the lounge. But my country is, people are sometimes a little bit blunt, which has its pros and cons, by the way. Now, 3 remarks. First, on the coordination between ministries, etc. on this subject. It's in my country very simple in that sense. When we talk about cyber security, we give a pivotal role to the Ministry of Justice and Public Safety. At the same time, when we talk about the overall questions about internet, cyber, etc., we have the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and especially there the Telecom Director General, which is of great leverage and importance. And we have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs when it is about the international dimensions. And we have the Ministry of Defense for the military side to the equation. And all this boils down to a simple message from our constitution that the government is providing the unity of governmental policy. So there you have it all. And when I'm not starting to talk about bureaucratic politics and that sort of things, I think that
that's fine.
This is the way it goes.
Thank you.
Now, with regard to the question about are we heading for regional kinds of internet, etc., etc. In Europe, due to the NSA affair, there have been voices about a European internet. But this has immediately got a strong, to my mind, legitimate rebuttal. And when actually, Dr. Sam, that comes immediately to a sort of closing remark on my part. We are not orienting ourselves to that sort of an internet world. What we try to do, also in our cyberspace conference in 2015, will be to bring as many countries as possible to this conference. In Seoul there were some 80 or so. We want to have there as many as possible. And actually the ambition is to get as much convergence as possible among as many countries as possible. And I'm not a utopian kind of guy who thinks that we will bring 193 countries to a common vision, common way of putting principles into practice, even of accepting principles. But I don't go for closure, I'm going for opening, which belongs to the notion of an open internet. And why? Because we do know, it's not a matter of faith, but we do know that the internet, whether we like it or not, is one of the driving forces for social and economic and human development throughout the whole world. So that is my position. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. So, I don't think I can, do you want to, some words from you, Ambassador?
Yeah.
Before we move to.
The special envoy, Professor Rosenthal, came to take the temperature in India on cyberspace because we are going to organize this international cyberspace conference. And I think the temperature here already is a bit higher than yesterday. It really gets, I think, a lot of information, good information, because we want to know what the position is of the Indian government, what the position is, the opinion of the stakeholders here, and what the situation in the country is. Because not only India is a very important cyber country, well anyway, India is going into a global role, but India also shares basic values with my country, and basic values of democracy, of independent justice and a free press. So, and this is of course touching, this fact that we share the basic values is touching on all the issues, more or less all the issues we discuss together. I think I'm very happy that all of you were present here at the presentation by Ambassador Rosenthal, and I thank you very much for presenting also the Netherlands view in this way. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here today.
Thank you. So I'm not going to wrap it up, but I'm just going to throw 3-4 ideas for you to take back, sir. I think one thing that sometimes we tended to do in the recent past is try to conflate or mix the issue of surveillance, security and governance. And I personally do not believe that surveillance is going away, irrespective of the governance framework that you create, be it independent ICANN, international ICANN, a US-owned ICANN, whichever way. So I believe that we tend to conflate these issues and they're separate issues. They should be looked discreetly. The second is that the idea of universalism is an ideal and we must try and move towards that. But I do not believe that we are at that place yet to try and enforce it. So hence there will have to be specific contextual arrangements which respond to regional and local needs. So you could have a larger core normative framework with a specific national, regional caveats, exceptions, whatever you know to call it. So I think that is something that must be considered. The third is, at the heart of this matter, it's really not where ICANN is located or who's sitting on the board. It is really about the critical resources which you mentioned. Who administers them, who manages them, who is finally having the veto over them. And I believe that most of us would agree in this room that we do not want to offer vetoes of the real world to people in the digital world. And I think that must clearly be an ideal that we work towards. No single country, region or community must exercise that kind of veto that we've seen in the past in the real world. And I think that's something that must be, which we all kind of to try and work towards. The fourth point was capacity, and I think this is really important. All of you brought this issue up in a number of multiple ways. Capacity to interact at international forums. Many people don't have the money, time, resources, people to participate in civil society conversations, IGF, MAG, etc., etc., etc. There's an issue of capacity. And this issue of capacity then relates to the issue of legitimacy. Children in our society at a much earlier stage. Cyber hygiene and cyber behavior and cyber processes can be, the need can really improve cyber security as a whole. If you're careful, if you're aware, and if you know, cyber security itself is the result of these. And finally, and this is a very important point someone mentioned in this table, and I think we need to try and understand that it is already happening. You don't want an international agreement? Good, don't want it. Big countries will agree to a certain code of conduct amongst themselves. I call it the C3. Russia, China and America tomorrow might decide that we will create a certain C3. So big 3 countries or big 5 countries or big 7 countries, and in one of those formations even India might be participating, or the emerging countries like the BRICS might be present. You might have a entente or a sort of a informal agreement amongst the top 10, 12 nations, the G20 of the digital world perhaps, which could agree that yes, between us we agree to a certain framework. And what does that do to the next 1 billion or 2 billion netizens who are going to be connected only in the next decade? What does that do to the inclusion? So I think this is also something that's already happening. And how do we prevent this masculine takeover or through big powers of the digital space. So I think the balance of narrative between free, open, and secure, and governed must always remain with free and open. And I have always believed that cyber security needs to be responded through technology and solutions and not through legislations and regulations. And we have the means. We need to create those cyber warriors. We need to create those cyber experts in each of our countries to try and respond to situations that we feel are adverse through technology, through knowledge, through know-how, through civil society interactions. And on that good note, you're all welcome to the lounge for tea and some refreshments. And I have some goodies for you to carry back to your country. And we also have a book from Karnika.
I will read it and I have nothing to do anymore.
This is for you from the ORF. And so this is for you. Thank you.
These are publications.
And yes, you can, this is what we produce here from research work. And it's all on cyber and and you're all welcome to